Well, the concerning new report from Food Banks Canada says increased levels of poverty and hunger are becoming normalized in Canada. Well, some new data compiled by Food Banks Canada now finds that almost 25% of Canadians are living in poverty.
That poverty and food insecurity in Canada has risen almost 40% over the past 2 years.
You may think poverty is a problem we solved a long time ago, a problem for other countries at our times, but it's not. It's right here, and look at the numbers, it's not really improving. But why should we care, even though the university is draining our bank accounts faster than the subscription we forgot to cancel? We're not poor, right? Well, at least not yet. According to Canada's official poverty dashboard, in 2023, about 10.2% of Canadians, which is roughly 4 million people, live below the official poverty line. What's even more troubling, the proportion of Canadians in deep income poverty, defined as earning below 75% of the poverty line, climbed to 5.3% of the population in 2023. These numbers tell us something important, that poverty in Canada isn't rare and it's not simple. University might be financially traumatizing, but these poverty stats are actually terrifying. It's not only about how much people earn, it's about access to food, housing, education, healthcare, and even the ability to participate fully in society. So, what exactly is poverty, you may ask? Well, poverty is the deprivation of resources, capabilities, and opportunities needed to maintain a basic standard of living. But let's talk about the harder question. Why does poverty persist? Socialist Herbert Gans had a theory, and it's not exactly comfortable here. He argued that poverty persists because, in some cases, it's actually useful to the system, not for people living in it, but for everyone else. Think about it. Someone has to do the lowest paid, most undesirable jobs, the ones that keep cities and industries running. And if social support is actually high enough to let people refuse these jobs, a lot of employers would suddenly have a problem, since nobody will be doing these jobs. But if we keep support low, in some sense, it kind of guarantees that there will always be people desperate enough to fill these roles. Then there's what Gans called the poverty industry. The entire ecosystem of social workers, nonprofits, government agencies, and even parts of the law enforcement that exist to manage poverty. If poverty were eliminated, a lot of these jobs, good, stable, middle-class jobs, would disappear. So, in a strange way, poverty kind of sustains employment, just not for the people who are poor or in it. And finally, there's politics. We often hear about underfunded housing or inadequate welfare as if those just happen by accident, but they're really just choices. Because if we ever made support truly adequate, the entire balance of who benefits and who doesn't would shift. In other words, when we talk about fixing poverty, we're also talking about who gets to decide what counts as a solution and who benefits it. This brings us to one of the most debated solutions out there, basic income. And we already tested it right here in Canada.
Back in 2017, Ontario launched a program called the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, or BIPD, under Premier Kathleen Wynne. Individuals who were single that made under $34K a year or under $48K if they're a couple got support from this program whether they're working or not. The goal was to see if having a livable minimum income could actually improve people's lives, such as improving their education, housing, health, and employment. Without strict restrictions, like the social welfare programs such as Ontario Works, this gave participants the opportunity to spend a little bit more on the things that made life feel, well, normal. This includes spending money on self-improvement activities. However, in 2019, the pilot program was unexpectedly canceled, mentioning that taxes would have to rise by 20% to make it work. They argued that it would de-incentivize work and that people would rely on these handouts, and just like that, the experiment ended. Now, to really understand this debate, you have to compare that to Ontario Works, which is the province's main social assistance program. However, it comes with a lot of strings attached. It's heavily monitored, there's tons of paperwork, and recipients have very little freedom. You can only spend on what the program says is your need, which is food, clothing, shelter, and nothing more. You're expected to be actively looking for work the entire time. So these two programs, Ontario Works and Ontario Basic Income Pilot, are both designed to fight poverty, but they're built on completely different ideas what poverty actually is. We believe that having a UBI, or Universal Basic Income, is not a neutral solution, but rather a contested attempt to define and address poverty as a social problem. Since it defines poverty beyond just income, it opposes the strict eligibility and spending criteria of social welfare programs such as Ontario Works, and it also opposes the financial and political agenda of employers and governments. Ontario Works treats poverty as an individual problem, something caused by unemployment or personal failure, such as believing those who are in poverty are simply there due to laziness. It is built on a neoliberal idea that people need incentives to work and that help should only go to those who quote-unquote deserve it. Ontario Basic Income Pilot, on the other hand, treats poverty as a systematic issue, a problem caused by unequal wealth distribution and not laziness. It also holds a belief that poverty extends way beyond just income and extends to one's opportunities, dignity, and one's ability to contribute meaningfully to society. As a result, they provide funding for individuals who are already employed to participate in self-improvement activities such as new hobbies, purchasing new furniture, travel, and even further education. Furthermore, it also assumes that when people have enough money to live by, they'll make rational, productive choices for themselves. This is supported by the statistics that show that mental and physical health outcomes improved after participants were in the program. 86% said that their anxiety went down, 83% reported less depression, and hospital ER visits also dropped by 37% in the area that the program was implemented. Furthermore, food bank usage also fell by 68%. Since Ontario Works treats poverty as only an income issue caused by unemployment, they only provide support to those that are actively unemployed and seeking work, which explains why they only provide basic support and shelter support. Ontario Basic Income Pilot is, on the other hand, is not a neutral solution because of the freedom it provides to recipients, which is very different from other solutions like social welfare that are very strict with their expense reporting. This program does not have strict restrictions as to where participants should spend their money, which according to one participant made, quote unquote, us feel dignity unlike programs like Ontario Works. There is no surveillance, reporting, or restrictions, all of which are hallmarks of social welfare programs. Instead of being reliant on heavy bureaucracy and paperwork, this social innovation relies on trust. This also reveals the different definitions of social assistance for both these organizations. While one believes that every human deserves the support since every human needs to be treated with respect and dignity, the other believes that it must be earned by working hard, such as by seeking employment, and the following specific behaviors such as only spending where necessary. Since fewer people meet these criteria, it leads to a smaller social safety net or welfare state, which is indicative of the neoliberal idea of minimal state intervention. While Ontario Works relies heavily on the idea that loosening the policies on social assistance funding will cause people to become lazy and not seek employment since they already have a basic income, the results from the study revealed that participants were seeking further education through their certifications, developing new skills, job hunting for more fulfilling careers, etc. While working, they had no fear of losing their job while advancing their career. This actually opposes the belief that since people are going to be earning a basic income, they will be quitting their jobs because instead of quitting their jobs, they're actually working ever harder than before. To conclude, the Ontario Basic Income Pilot is not a neutral solution. It's a contested attempt to define and address social problems such as poverty because it challenges the interest of powerful groups, especially governments and employers. By giving people a steady income rather than relying on programs like Ontario Works, the pilot shows individuals that they don't need to accept a job because they are unemployed. They can reject unsafe jobs, unfair wages, or poor working conditions. And as Gans explained, poverty often depends on exploiting low-wage workers, and basic income shifts the power from employers to the employees. The system also disrupts the poverty industry, large network of agencies, offices, and bureaucratic systems that profit from complex programs like Ontario Works. If funding goes directly to people instead of through these organizations, many of these for-profit structures lose power and may collapse. Basic income also reduces government control, since participants can spend their money how they choose. This challenges the political values of governments that prioritize low taxes and limited social support. Programs like Basic Income Pilot and Ontario Works often reflect what each government values more: stronger social assistance funding funded by higher taxes or lower taxes with reduced support. All this brings us back to the thesis that UBI is not neutral. It's a contested attempt to define and address poverty. This is evident in the conflicted definitions of poverty, like systematic versus individual, lack of income versus lack of opportunity, the different ways the funding is distributed, like through strict eligibility versus a more universal approach, and a group that benefits or loses from these programs, including governments, employers, and entire industries. In the end, Ontario Works and Ontario Basic Income Pilot are not just policy tools, they are statements about who has the power to define what poverty really means. Is poverty simply not being able to afford rent? Or does it also mean not being able to afford hobbies, vacations, or a music class? Who gets to decide where need ends and where want begins? If we let government define poverty, it just becomes a question about eligibility and control. If we let the market define it, then poverty is just unproductive behavior and making bad choices. But if we define it as a systemic problem, then programs such as Ontario Basic Income Pilot become less about charity and more about justice. Of course, basic income isn't perfect. It costs a lot of money, and it changes incentives. It challenges the way the system works, but that's kind of like the point, because right now, a lot of social programs are designed to manage poverty, not end it. And if Gantz was right that poverty exists because it's useful to the system, then any real solution is going to feel uncomfortable to the people who benefit from things staying the way they are. So maybe the real question isn't just about the money, it's about whether we can afford to keep living with poverty the way it is. Thank you.